It's funny how life can change so abruptly, how everything you once thought was stable and secure can shift in the blink of an eye. If anyone had told me a year ago that I would be where I am today, I would have laughed. I would have argued that my life was perfect, or at least as close to perfect as anyone could hope for. But life has a way of surprising you. It started on a quiet Tuesday morning, an unremarkable day that would mark the beginning of the end for me. I was in my hotel room, miles away from home, having traveled for a work project that was supposed to be my big break. I had landed the lead on a project that my firm had been chasing for years, and if I could pull it off, I'd be on the fast track to partner. It was everything I had been working toward for the last decade. I had been married to Liam for 2 years, but we had been together much longer, 8 years. Liam was the kind of man people described as a good guy, reliable, handsome, a hard worker. He had started his own contracting business a few years back, and things were going well. I was proud of him. We had a good life together, or at least I thought we did. We were even talking about starting a family, settling into the next phase of our lives. But that Tuesday morning, everything began to unravel. I was getting ready to leave for the day, standing in front of the mirror and adjusting my blazer when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up, expecting a message from my boss or maybe a reminder for the meeting I had scheduled later that day. Instead, it was from Liam. Nothing unusual. Just a quick message. Morning, hope you have a great day. I smiled at it, feeling that familiar warmth I always felt when he checked in on me. But something nagged at the back of my mind. It had been there for weeks now, ever since I noticed a subtle shift in the way we communicated. It was hard to pinpoint, but his texts seemed different, shorter, more distant. When we FaceTimed, there was a tension in the air, like he was distracted by something or someone. I tried to push the feeling aside, chalking it up to the stress of work. Liam had been handling several big projects with his business, and I was away more than I had ever been before. It wasn't unusual for us to be tired, to be off kilter. But as I looked at his text that morning, something in my gut told me that this time was different. Later that night, after a long day of meetings, I found myself staring at my phone again. I was exhausted, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Liam hadn't called me that evening like he usually did, so I sent him a message. How's everything at home? Miss you. No response. I waited a few minutes, telling myself that he was probably busy, maybe working late. But the nagging feeling in my stomach grew stronger, gnawing at me until I couldn't stand it anymore. I opened up my laptop and logged into our shared phone account, something I had never done before. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but as I scrolled through the call logs, I saw it. A number I didn't recognize, one that had appeared over and over again in the last month. Calls at all hours of the day, late at night, early in the morning, and long conversations in the middle of the afternoon when he should have been working. My heart started to pound as I stared at the number. I didn't recognize the number, but my intuition told me exactly what was going on. I could barely sleep that night. The next morning, I called Liam as usual, trying to sound normal, trying to ignore the rising tide of dread inside me. He was his usual charming self, but now that I had seen the phone logs, I couldn't help but notice the subtle evasions in his voice. Was everything okay at home? I asked. He assured me it was, but I didn't believe him. When I hung up, I felt like I was falling into a deep, dark hole. For the next week, I tried to act like nothing was wrong, but it was eating me alive. I couldn't concentrate at work. I couldn't sleep. Every time I heard his voice, I wanted to scream, to confront him, but I didn't have the proof. Not yet. It wasn't until I got home, back to the apartment we had shared for years, that everything came crashing down. I returned from my trip 2 days early, hoping to surprise Liam. I didn't tell him I was coming back, thinking it would be a nice gesture. I even picked up his favorite takeout from the Thai place down the street. When I got to our apartment, I used my key to let myself in, expecting to find him working in his home office. Instead, I found an unfamiliar pair of women's shoes by the door. My heart stopped. I stood there, frozen, my breath catching in my throat. I knew what was happening. I had known it for weeks, but seeing the evidence with my own eyes was like a punch to the gut. I dropped the food on the floor and walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing through the apartment. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, my worst fear was confirmed. There she was, the woman from upstairs, Sarah. She was sitting on our bed, pulling on one of her shoes, while Liam stood next to her, looking like a deer caught in headlights. They both froze when they saw me. For a moment, none of us said anything. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Then Liam spoke, his voice shaky and low. I didn't expect you to be home yet. No apologies, no explanations, just those simple words. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The rage boiling inside me was too much. I turned on my heel and walked out, slamming the door behind me. My mind was spinning. My body felt numb. I could barely register what had just happened. I ended up walking to the park nearby, the one Liam and I used to go to on weekends. We used to sit on the bench by the lake and talk about our future, about the kids we wanted to have, the life we wanted to build. But all of that felt like a lie now. How long had this been going on? How many times had she sat on my bed? How many lies had he told me while I was away, thinking we were still building something together? As I sat there, the shock started to wear off, replaced by a cold, steely determination. I wasn't going to be the fool in this story. I wasn't going to let him off the hook so easily. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I returned to the apartment later that night, half expecting Liam and Sarah to be gone. But when I opened the door, Liam was sitting on the couch, alone, his face buried in his hands. He didn't look up when I came in. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why would you do this to me?" He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "I don't know. I didn't mean for it to happen." I scoffed. "You didn't mean for it to happen? Liam, you've been lying to me for months. You let her into our home, our bed. And now you're telling me it didn't mean anything?" His silence was answer enough. Over the next few days, the truth slowly unraveled. Liam admitted that the affair had been going on for over 3 months. It had started while I was away, he said, when he felt lonely and neglected. Sarah had been a comfort to him, someone who understood the pressures he was under. It was a betrayal I never saw coming. I had been working so hard to build a future for us, sacrificing my time and energy, believing that we were in this together. But while I was away, he had been building a future with someone else. The hardest part was realizing that he had no real remorse. Even after I confronted him, even after I caught him red-handed, he never truly apologized. He made excuses, tried to rationalize his actions, but there was no genuine regret in his voice. I started to wonder if I ever really knew him at all. That was when I decided to hire a private investigator. Part of me felt ridiculous, like I was taking things too far, but I needed to know the full extent of his betrayal. I wasn't sure if I could believe anything Liam told me anymore, and I wasn't about to leave any stone unturned. The investigator worked quickly, and within a few days, I had all the answers I needed. Liam hadn't just been seeing Sarah. There had been others before her, brief flings, all while I was away on business trips. The man I thought I knew had been living a double life for years, hiding behind a mask of loyalty and love. When I received the report, I felt sick to my stomach. How could I have been so blind? How could I have let him deceive me for so long? That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I wasn't going to be the victim. I gathered all the evidence, every text, every photo, every detail from the investigator's report, and I sent it to everyone we knew: his family, his friends, his colleagues. I wanted them all to see the man he really was, the lies he had been living. The fallout was immediate. His parents called me, distraught, begging me to reconsider. His friends reached out, expressing their shock and disappointment. Liam, of course, was furious. He accused me of trying to ruin his life, of making things worse than they already were. But I didn't care anymore. I was done protecting him. He had shattered my life, and now he had to face the consequences. The next morning, I filed for divorce. underscore 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 underscore. A week later, Liam tried one last time to apologize. He came to the apartment to collect the rest of his things, and as he stood in the doorway, he looked at me with those familiar blue eyes, the ones that had once made me feel so safe and loved. "I never wanted it to end like this," he said softly, but it didn't matter anymore. I had already let go. "Neither did I replied, my voice steady. "But this is the choice you made." He left without another word, and as the door closed behind him, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was over. The chapter of my life that I thought would last forever had come to an abrupt, painful end. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and while the wounds are still healing, I'm learning to move on. I've started painting again, something I used to love before life got too busy. I've reconnected with old friends, spent time focusing on myself, rediscovering the things that make me happy. There are days when the loneliness creeps in, when I miss the life I thought I had. But I've also realized something important. I deserve more. I deserve to be with someone who values me, who doesn't look for excuses to betray me. The road ahead isn't easy, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I'm hopeful. Life goes on, even after heartbreak, and I'm ready to see what comes next.